It's Wednesday, March 12th, guys, and I spent the last days browsing through your amazing feedback after episode number 242 and my posts on social media concerned about the adventure I had last Friday, where I was picking up a wine collection of roughly about 300 bottles in Munich. And people were asking so many questions. Is there anything out of my vintage? Why do you buy this crappy stuff? How do you do that? What's the process behind? And is there anything that you can really drink? And I want to answer all these questions in this episode. I'm trying to talk about the reason why it makes sense to buy old wines, to taste some of them, or just doing research on old wines and the prices and get a feeling for what is going on in the world of rare wines, it doesn't have to be rare wines, but just aged wines, okay? And this is what this episode is all about. Have fun with 243 talking about wine collections. Welcome to the Pinot and Pixel podcast episode number 243. And today we want to answer the question, why might it be a good idea to have a look on older wines every now and then and maybe even buy a small collection if possible? And before we start with the process and everything that is behind, I have to clarify maybe two or three things. First of all, there is no commercial approach, okay? We're talking about something fun, something exciting. It's more about the educational part and maybe trying to find a hidden treasure that has aged more than it usually could and to just learn more about wine. And to start this episode, I want to tell you a story about a younger Alex, a younger May, maybe 7 to 8 years ago. I was getting deeper into wine and I was tasting a lot, and it was the time where I was doing the International Wine Marketing Masters and the WSET first level 3 and then the diploma in parallel. And I started tasting more wines, and I really got to the point where I was able to smell and taste the wine and even put it to a specific region and get the characteristics of specific grape varieties. And every now and then people ask me, is this really possible? Yes, it is, but because it's nothing else than a decision tree you have in your head. Everyone has a different tree. Mine usually starts with the separation of cool or warm climate. And then you go down, the parameters of what are you tasting. But this is another episode. What I was trying to say is it was easy to find a region or a variety behind the aromas that are currently existing, usually primary or secondary. But when it comes to aged wines, where wines are really changing and you don't really have a feeling what is, Sauvignon going to be in 10 or 20 years? What is the tertiary aroma of maybe a Riesling, a Cabernet, or Pinot Noir, something like this? And this is where I started tasting older wines. And then in 2000, I think it was 18 or 19, a friend, Sebastian, called me and said, Alex, I will move. I have to leave my house, and there is this huge collection of wines in my cellar. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's nothing really worthy, valuable, so you can't just sell it on the internet and get a fortune, but it's really interesting to have some of these wines in a glass to taste and try. Some of them have already been way over the top, talking about, a screw cap Pinot Noir, 15 years of age, from an entry-level brand from New Zealand. But it was amazing to try this, just to get a feeling on how this actually develops. And this was, I would say, one of the starting points where I started to think of hunting for smaller collections, to be actually surprised by the things that I'm finding. Turned out to be an interesting topic for me. It's still a leisure part, so there's no commercial approach, nothing at all. But I love to find collections, rate collections like this, and also get some bottles in my cellar to taste them with friends, with colleagues, or just give it as a gift to people who are looking for their personal vintage. And this brings me to one of the most important questions. Usually when people ask me, do you have something of vintage XYZ in the cellar? I ask the same question in the beginning. Do you really want to have something drinkable, or is it just decoration? And this is a very important question because you can't imagine how many people are really crazy on spending a fortune of money on bottles where the vintage they're looking for, the region they're looking for, is printed on the label no matter how vinegary the liquid in the bottle actually is. And for me, of course, I mean, I get it if it's just kind of a sign, something that is romantically connected to someone and you just want to give, look, there is the name of the region or the vintage on the bottle. I get it. But when we talk about the enjoyment of a really good product, of a really good glass of wine, you should be more on the drinkable side. And of course, this changes the prices totally. And some people even don't know if the wine in the bottle is still drinkable or not unless they haven't tasted it. But before we get to the point why you should have an eye on bottles like this and how you can really know if this is drinkable or not, I would like to take you through the process of evaluating a collection because it's standardized. And again, this is no commercial approach at all. It is something that I have, trained myself to do it like this. Maybe if you talk to a professional, he or she would say, this is totally wrong, but this is something that turned out to be good just for me, for myself, for the things I have been looking for, I've been collecting, and I want to take you through this process. So first of all, if somebody calls me, I have a collection over here, I'm always excited because if, the thing is, usually when people want to sell a collection, there is often a really bad situation, the reason for it. Either somebody has died or they ran out of business or they need the money for something. So usually people just don't sell wine collections because they're happy with it and they want, to share it. But with some empathy and just curiosity and also the valuation of someone's wine collection, you get access to the people. And, I'm a curious person by nature. So when people tell me I want to sell my wine collection or I have to sell my collection, I say, okay, what is part of the collection? And then you find out, okay, the region, maybe the vintages, stuff like that. And I always have a first look just to get a feeling of, is it really worth it? Because some people think they have a very expensive collection in the cellar, and then they send you pictures of Cadefrati Lugana, and this is no bashing of the brand at all. But if you have a 20-year-old bottle of a wine that is meant to be drunk in the first 5 years after production, and the whole collection is full of wines like that, usually it doesn't make any sense. But this needs time, and of course, you have to educate yourself a lot on the wines and the regions and the styles in general. And in the beginning, I started with Google, and you should do that too. But we will come to the takeaways in a second. So have a look at first sight. Do a quick list with names, with vintages, and the amount of bottles to get a feeling if this is really worth investing the time to evaluate the collection, if people are not paying for it, and maybe if this is even something I would be interested in. And if the answer is yes, the next step usually is the full listing of the collection. So full documentation with vintage, quantity, condition, and photos. And condition and photos is very, very important because usually this is also the factor that is responsible for the final price. Because we always think that a big name, a big wine will get its money, but you have to check the filling level, the condition of the bottle, of the cork, of the capsule, and of course, you need photos because people want to have photos of the pictures. And please, always, if you are selling old wines or you are interested in old wines, vice versa, please look or provide the original photo of the bottle. There are so many auction houses and websites that are offering old wines, old vintages with the original bottle of the 2016 Chateau this and that. This doesn't make any sense at all. And sometimes the description is like Chateau Giscourt. I recently read that. Chateau Giscourt 1985, highly damaged, but the original picture of the 2018 or so subscription bottle. And then the price is 80% of the original price that is listed. in auction houses. Why should I buy this bottle? I have no feeling for this bottle at all. And the filling level, if you want a drinkable bottle, is the most important one. So a full documentation. And when I have the list, I usually sit down at home, and it takes me a lot of time to, browse through auction houses, through specific websites. And of course, also eBay is a very important source. I mean, usually people are shitting on eBay as a platform when it comes to old wine, but there are two reasons for me that really speak for eBay as a platform to buy wines. One, if you want to get usually a cheaper access to an interesting bottle, then eBay is your place to be, because people still think, and I would say in 90% it's the case, if a bottle finds its way on eBay, usually they tried several other things to sell it in private or through auction houses, and they just weren't able to. The other 10 to 20% is time, or they are really approved sellers, and there are many sellers at the moment on eBay because they feel and they see that this is working quite well. And the second reason is, if let's say I'm interested in a winery or in a specific vintage, and I just want to get a feeling of, is this really worth it? And there is a single bottle of a 1996 Chateau La Lagune. I buy this bottle, I taste it, I try it, and then I judge, or I try to evaluate if it's worth to buy an, original wooden case with 12 bottles or so. So out of curiosity, buying a bottle that usually is a bit cheaper on eBay, this is the second reason to buy over there. And the third thing, and this is more on the side of somebody who is interested in the value of a bottle, eBay offers you the option to filter by sold items. So if you're looking for a specific wine or a vintage, and you go through sold items, you set the filter on sold items, you see what has been sold in the past, and then you get a feeling on how much the bottle is really worth. And this is very, very important, because usually if people want to sell bottles, just one or a whole collection, what do they usually do? They Google Chateau Giscourt 1985, and the price pops up 178 euros. It's the cheapest bottle you can get. And then you look on eBay and you see that it's sold between 90 and 100 euro. And then you get a feeling, because there's a difference between the listing price of an item and the sales price of an item. So what the bottle was actually sold for. And this is very important, guys, because you can list items for whatever price you want. If you are sold the cheapest on the internet, this is not the value of a bottle. And this is why platforms like LiveX are so important, because you see the actual price development of bottles, and on eBay, for example, or on auction houses that are transparent with the end of their auctions, you can usually see what the bottles have been sold for. They are very important resources, guys. And what is also very important when it comes to the price of a bottle or of a whole collection. Let's say you have a collection of 100 bottles, and usually the owners are happy or interested in, let's put it like this, selling the whole collection, because they just need the space. They don't want to have it in the cellar anymore. They want to get rid of it, or they just need the money. And depending on the collection, only a small or a specific amount, a percentage of the collection is really valuable and or sellable. Because there are some wines that might be really interesting, but nobody's interested in that. It's more about, having it in your cellar, try it every now and then, and just be curious, share it with people and friends. But if you are interested in selling bottles, a good hint is, if you Google a bottle and you can't find it, neither on Google nor on eBay, maybe only a few people are interested in, or it's just not a brand that is age-worthy, or people are just not interested in specific vintages or versions of that wine. This doesn't mean that this cannot be an interesting wine, but talking about the evaluation of a collection, you have to spare these bottles out. So usually you end up in saying, I have a collection that is worth 5,000 euro, 100 bottles, and only 30% of them are really in a condition and in a state where people are interested in it. So right now the value is 1,500 euro, and then you have to imagine that you have to sell it, you have to document it, you have to treat all the bottles in the right way, and you have to store them at home, even if this is your personal approach, okay? And that selling from private persons to private persons is something you have to consider, because when you see a bottle sitting on the shelf for 178 euro in an auction house or in a, I don't know, rarity wine cellar, they usually know what they are selling and this might still be drinkable. And it's another thing that I found this bottle in my cellar and I want to sell it for the exact same price. This won't work. And if you browse the auctions on eBay, you usually can read stored in perfect condition. It has always been a wine cellar in perfect condition. 12 to 13 degrees, 70% humidity, perfectly stored. And then you buy the bottle, you receive it, and it's dry like the Gobi Desert. And I don't know, the bottle is just crappy vinegar, And it's tough because usually the whole history of a bottle is not documented. This is why I love talking to people that say, I bought these wines on my own, I put them in the cellar, and I haven't touched them since. And of course, this is a lot of trust. There should be a level of trust. And I usually, if I have a connection with the person and I feel a level of trust, I'm just more interested in the bottles, even though there's no documentation or so. But if he or she tells me I have bought this at the winery talking to this and that guy, and I put it in my cellar, and they have a layer of dust like 2-3 centimeters thick on the bottles, it should be the case. And if not, whatever, who cares? This is the actual process, documenting it, trying to find the prices on the internet, then making an offer usually, or just saying, okay, the value is this and I can offer you that. And most of them I would drink on my own because, and I know that there are some bad guys out there who just tell you that your collection is not valuable just to get it for a small amount. And this is something I can't talk a lot about, but, I always try to treat people in a very fair way, that when you'd make the deal, both sides are happy. For me, this is very important. And I'm always transparent with the prices. This might not be the case if somebody is doing this, commercially, but this is just out of curiosity, and I'm always transparent. This is the list of your wines. This is the price I found on auction houses, on the internet, on web shops. These are the prices of eBay of the last 6 or 8 months. And the estimated value is this and that. But considering all the facts and the parameters, I can offer you, 500 euro, 1,000 euro, stuff like that. This is my way of trying to treat people as fair as possible. Because, there's also work on my side and they get rid of the whole collection. But I just love to study wine, just to find out what the winemaker has done in this year. And it's so interesting sometimes when you find one of the first bottles of a winery that has ever been made from the 70s, from the 80s, whatever, in Priorat, in Barolo, regions that have just been popping up at that time. And then when you taste it and it's not vinegar, you get a feeling of where they started, and if you know the story, where they have come from and where they have been going over the last years. Super interesting and super exciting. And I'm a histories guy, so I love stuff like that. And of course, there are always no-gos and common mistakes. Let's put it like this. One of my absolute no-gos are collections in really poor condition, especially when people tell you that it has been stored correctly. And poor condition doesn't mean that they are dusty or dirty or so, because I'm not a reseller, okay? It's just, if a label is damaged, this is not cool to resell the bottle, but I don't care, For me, the condition of the storing, the filling level of the bottle, and the condition of the cork and the capsule is more important. Because the higher the filling level of the wine bottle actually is, the higher the likelihood is that this is still drinkable. There is always an angel share because the cork is a natural product. And, talking about the levels, I take this bottle over here. You have the shoulder of the Bordeaux bottle. This is easier to judge, actually. And if it's just on the top of this shoulder, it's called top shoulder or very top shoulder, depending on how far it has gone. It might be possible that this is still drinkable. And just talking about the bottle I have in my hand, this is a bottle from 1950, okay? This bottle is 75 years old and it's high shoulder. it can be drinkable, but we never know until we have opened it. This is a gift for somebody, but this is what I like. This is why I like it. And this is a winery, La Tour du Haut-Moulin, that is not super famous. Some people know it, but it would absolutely be amazing to try this kind of stuff. Okay, so collections in poor condition is an absolute no-go. The second is cheap, unknown wines with no value. And, this is not the commercial approach. It's more like you shouldn't buy collections where the wines are not meant to age more than 3 to 5 years. So like, I don't know, just talking about stereotypes, varieties like Bacchus, like Müller-Thurgau, like entry-level Pinot Grigio, like Lugana. This is not, if you find a collection of wines like that, just, take pictures and go away. Red wines maybe are a bit more age-worthy, and when it comes to specific regions, Bordeaux, Barolo, Brunello, then the likelihood is higher that this might be something you can still drink. It's a lot of research, guys. So if you see some names, just Google it and then you get a feeling. And of course, it's also something that really depends on experience. And over time, it has changed a lot. Just talking about myself, when I'm looking at bottles of the first collection I bought, I kept some of them. They have been vinegar 3 years after they have been published. And I bought them 50 years later. Because, I don't know, maybe I thought that I could use it for a salad dressing or something like this. I don't know. So cheap wines, per condition, 2 no-gos. And then, of course, storing issues. So when you have a look at the collection and you immediately can feel dry air, higher temperatures, you see corks popping out of the bottle, you see wine rinsing out of the cork. You have tiny little spots on the floor of red wine, white wine, whatever, and you have this vinegary smell in the air. You should not buy this collection. There can be some treasures, but it's a lot of work to just go through all of them. And if you have to throw away 95% of a collection, it might not be worth it. But this is your decision. And last but not least, in some decades and regions, there have been cork problems. For example, Bordeaux, 1990s, there is a high probability that you will find bottles that are corked. And usually having just tastings from the 90s in Bordeaux, let's say Grand Cru level or at least Cru Bourgeois, I would say 20% of the bottles are corked. And this can just be my, choice of bottles, but I had this several times with even bottles that weren't out of my cellar. And yeah, if you know this, just be aware. And there are also some wineries, for example. Recently, I was talking to a colleague about Clos de Pape, and he said usually every third or even every second bottle is corked. And if you buy a collection of these wines, you have to, just put this into your evaluation. So saying it's just half the price if you are interested in a bottle like this. So yeah, no-gos, common mistakes, and talking about how to find the perfect bottle as a gift, it's always the same question. Do you want it as a decoration or do you want to have a drinkable bottle? And there's a big difference between vinegar and wine. Every wine has the exact same goal in life. It wants to become vinegar. And it's just a matter of time when this is happening. From the common mistakes to the personal side of collecting wines like this, it is freaking amazing. You learn so much about wine, about the development of wine, about varieties and regions and the change over time. This is absolutely amazing. And to be fair, there are some wines that are said to be dead because your palate is just used to Grand Cru Bordeaux or Burgundy, Romanée-Conti, stuff like that. I mean, if you're a person like this, I get why you are not interested in La Tour du Haut-Moulin 1950. But meaning that a bottle is not anymore on the top doesn't mean that it's not drinkable, okay? Just imagine the life of a wine as a parable. So it takes some time to get to the top, and then it falls down. And I mean, there are only a few measures for this, but just imagine it like this. And some wines are like this, so very, very pointed parabola, And then you have the ones with the flat pearl, okay? And the flat ones are the really interesting ones. So I'm talking about wines that can age for 50, 60, 70 years. And the only question about the top is, if you have it right now to try it, will it get better over time? Will it open up? Will it change in aromas? Will it add something to what you're currently having in the glass? This is a very important question, but it doesn't mean that you can't drink a wine that might be on the top right now in 10 or 15 years. And this is what excites me so much. Having an old bottle of wine, sharing it with people, and then getting the feeling of, oh wow, this is amazing. And 2 weeks ago, we had this rarity tasting from the 70s, which was basically a crappy vintage. If you're interested in that, listen to podcast episode 241. But having wines in your glass that are at least 45 to 55 years old, that are still enjoyable, and they express a specific character, maybe even of the wine or the vintage. This is amazing. Which food do you know that can age for more than 3 to 5 years, if it's not in cans or so? And we are talking about liquids that are age-worthy for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. That is so amazing when we talk about wine. And of course, there are some spirits that can do this as well. Sweet wine, sure. We're talking about wine, and this is what really excites me when we talk about wine. And then, if you want to get a feeling on how wine can age, there is another thing next to buying old collections or older vintages of the wines you're currently having in your cellar, the Coravin experiment. So Coravin is this tool with the needle and the argon gas on it, where you just put the needle through the cork, then you push the button, you put some argon in the bottle, and it causes an overpressure, and then the overpressure makes wine come out of the needle again to just pour you 1 or 2 glasses without opening the bottle. And I have done this with 2 or 3 Bordeaux bottles in my cellar since 2016. When did I start? 2016. Every single year, a small glass of the exact same wine, taking notes just to get a feeling on how the wine is developing. And this is how you get a feeling on how a wine can age. And of course, there might be a point where there is too much argon in the bottle and the bottle is changing in a way that it usually wouldn't do. But, this is not representative. This is just my personal experiment. And so far, I would say 60% is still in the bottle, and it's really interesting to try every single year. And my biggest advantage of collecting old wines and, looking out for older collections is sharing wines with friends and colleagues. It's so amazing. I have never had this opportunity when I was, 20, 25, and I was starting to be interested in wine, that people said, do you want to try something out of your vintage? And I don't know if I would have liked it at that time, but just saying, what is your vintage? How old are you? I would love to share a bottle of your vintage with you, just to give people access to wines like that. And I recently had a chat with a really good friend of mine, Stefan. He also said to me, of course, I'm a beer drinker. I love wine every now and then, but younger ones. But I want to experience how older wines really taste. And this is why I love sharing it with people. Sometimes you get surprised in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. I always can remember the Chianti 82 I opened at my birthday in this cellar with Maxime. 4 p.m. We opened it, we tried it, and then we ran out and said, everybody grab a glass right now, because in 15 minutes, this wine is dead. He was just losing with oxygen, or as Neil Martin puts it, oxygen was kicking away its walking sticks. Yeah, well, but this is why I love it. It's such a broad field, and it's super fun. So much fun to experience all this kind of stuff, to try wine like that. So to wrap this up, give you kind of some tips for beginners. Don't be afraid of old wines. Try them. There is no way that, this would be unhealthy for you unless there are animals in it, but usually it's just vinegar, okay? If you don't like it, just spit it out, pour it away, but always try it. Try old wines. Try it with people who know what they're doing, and maybe they want to share an older bottle with you. Tasting is the best way to learn about wine, about taste, to train your palate, to train your nose. It's so amazing to see the development, and it happens quite quickly, actually. Maybe 3 to 6 months, and you've actually feel the development. This can be good, and this can be bad. If you're using public transport, you can even smell if somebody hasn't showered for 3 days, but You can also tell which herbs you might find in a bottle of wine, or if this would be the perfect pairing for your roast beef or beef bourguignon or whatever, grilled vegetables with this and that. And last but not least, be patient. The best insights come with time. And I have been tasting wines in this manner for, I would say, 10 years now. And it's so amazing. It's so exciting. And it also changed the way I look at wines. I look at consumption, because drinking less but better also came out of this. So my approach, drinking less but better, is buy a good bottle of wine, look out for an aged version, and then just compare it. Invite some friends who might be interested in stuff like that, and have an amazing time together. This is it, guys. I hope there are some things that you can use for your next old bottle. If you are interested in a bottle of your vintage, I would love to share it with you. Send me an email at podcast@pinotpixel.com. And right now, have a wonderful week. See you on Saturday with the weekly update. Ciao, ciao.